Thank you, Chris. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm absolutely astonished at this turnout. You know, an awful night like this, and for you all to come, it's brilliant. So I just hope you're not disappointed. Anyway, yes, I'm the secretary of ENHAS, Eastbourne Natural History and Archaeology Society, but the emphasis is on the archaeology. And I'm also the chairman of Family Roots. And last year, our speaker had to cancel at the last minute. This was for ENHAS. And so I stepped in, and somebody's phone going off, I think. And I stepped in and said, well, I've been doing a bit of research on the Roman villa. I'll do a talk on that. So, and this is so this is only the second time I've done this, but I have added quite a bit since the first talk. We did have a publication that was put together by Lawrence Stevens and Richard Gilbert in the 1970s, I think, and we've sold out now. So our plan is to have a new book on the Eastbourne villa. So I'm going to change hands and hope that this will work. So whereabouts was the villa? You can see the pier, and so running from in that sort of direction there was the villa, and it was very large, so it covered a lot of land. And the sea, of course, was much further back. Some estimates are that it could be as much as a kilometre from the sea. But you know what Romans are like. They chose good spots with a good view. So it was there facing the sun in the daytime, and with a beautiful view of the sea. So when I first started to look into the villa, being a bit of a painter, I decided to have a go at what I thought it would look like. And this was my first attempt. I showed this to David Rudlin, who is Eastbourne School, Sussex School of Archaeology, and who knows everything about Romans, especially in Sussex. And his response was, it's far too small. It wasn't that sort of villa at all. You've got it quite wrong. What you've shown is a villa rustica. So this villa rustica was really a farmhouse. So most villas that were here were large farmhouses with outbuildings, and this, what he thinks, was more of a palace than a villa. So I then had another go. And this was my second attempt to try and make it a bit bigger. Oh yes, go back to the first one. I told David, they're the bathhouses there on the right, because there's talk of finding remains of a bathhouse. And of course his first response was, well, bathhouses didn't have ridged roofs. If you think about it, if it had got a ridged ceiling, a pointy ceiling inside, the water would drip on you. So bathhouses always had round roofs. So that's the bathhouse there. These are more outbuildings, and this is part of the villa. I think David's response to the second one was, it's still too small. It wants to be bigger. It wasn't that size. So I looked at other villas, illustrations. These are illustrations. These are my paintings. These are other artists' illustrations. And so you see, this is the sort of farmhouse type of one. This is a bit bigger. This is a bit bigger still, but they're still on quite a small scale, really. And then Chedworth, which is quite a famous one in Gloucestershire, that is getting more to the size, where you've got these courtyards here, and the main entrance in like this. This is Fishbourne. You probably recognise this one. And this is what David thinks it was more on a scale with. Now, Fishbourne is the largest was the largest Roman building outside Italy. And so it was enormous, and they still haven't excavated it all because there's modern housing on part of it. But this is part of this part they have got a model of, and you can see the bathhouse here with the rounded roofs, and there would be lots more formal gardens and everything laid out. So not a farmhouse at all. Now, it's very difficult to date Eastbourne's Roman villa because there's so little that we know about it. But it was probably started in about 65 AD, that sort of time. And Pompeii and Herculaneum were covered with the ash from Vesuvius in 79 AD. Right, got that right. And so it's quite interesting to compare the two. So these are some wall paintings from Pompeii. Put John's favourite one in there, and Pompeii Red, just to give you an idea. I'm not saying there were wall paintings there because we just don't know. We've not found any plaster. But presumably, if it was a grand palace-style building, then there would be wall paintings. And also there'd be mosaics. So again, these are mosaics from Pompeii. The famous one, Beware of the Dog, down at the bottom, Cave Canem. And these sort of geometric patterns, I think they were the sort of patterns in the early villas. As techniques improved, they got more pictorial. But from the description, it sounds as if they were these rather simple geometric designs, probably just in 2 or 3 colours, not with a great palette range. But that's the sort of thing we're sort of imagining. So what evidence is there to show on the villa? So this is Richard Budgeon's map of 1724, and you'll see Eastbourne, and then there's little asterisks there, and then from a pavement, bath and foundations which reach wide about this place. Here is coupled to the place of an ancient Roman station. So this was the time when it was first recorded that there were some remains along the seafront in Eastbourne, and they recorded them on this map. This map, now this is 100 years, well, more than 100 years later, 1848, this is put together, and showing these are the foundations of what was actually here. And it does say up at the top, it says the field house. So we know whereabouts the field house was, which is, and this is property from the Elms, and so you can sort of, you'll be able to see on the next map exactly where it was. So that's that same map, but superimposed on a more modern map. So you've got Queen's Hotel and the pier, and then the Cavendish is going to be down here somewhere. And so the remains that they found were there, and some at the field house, and columns found out. I'll talk about that again in a few minutes. So this part really is what was found from 1712, 1724 onwards, and then in Victorian times, 1848, they began to develop the promenade. So they're digging to make the layout, and at this time it was like a cliff along there before, and so they're levelling it out into stages to make the promenade. Right, so what finds come from this Roman villa? Very, very little. A few were destroyed in the bombing of the Institute, the museum, where the library is now at the bottom of Grove Road. But some others were sent to Lewis, and some went to Montreal in Canada. One of the flute tiles, well, they found 2 flute tiles in Eastbourne in a house called the Greys, nowhere near where the villa was, but the house was owned by a man that owned the field house and the area around there. So it's believed that he brought these flute tiles up there, and they are quite distinctive. So they're rather broken, and I have been meaning to, I think that they have got one in the museum collection here now. They've certainly got one in Lewis. I think there were 2 that were found. So they need photographing again, really. So how did this work, these flue tiles? What was all this about? Well, it was the hypercore system, the way of heating their houses, a shallow cellar with a furnace in it, and these tiles are supporting the floor above, and then the hot air is driven along the floor and also up the walls, and these are the flue tiles here on the wall. So you can see, I mean, in this instance it's heating the baths, but they would use this throughout the well-to-do villas as a way of heating. And it was 2 of these flue tiles that they found, not intact of course, but obviously recognisable, and they'd only come from a high status building. So these are the drawings made by a man called Mr. Brooke in 1845 or 48, midnight. Oh, well, there's the date at the bottom there, look. 1839 or so.
The date's at the top right, Helen.
1836, I think, up there. But anyway, that sort of date. And he made a series of drawings. So this is looking with the sea on the right-hand side, and this is the field house. So this is looking out towards the east. Northeast, that sort of area, and you'll see the line of the building, the foundations that are left, which was stone, mostly stone, that they found. And this is a view standing on the shingle, looking up towards the remains above, and you can see the height of them. So what was originally thought of as a corridor villa, which was my first sort of interpretation, was quite wrong. They think now that there were lots more buildings that went over here that have all been washed away by the sea. So you can just make out the Wish Tower there, and so that's looking west, would be that way, yeah, that area. And this one's quite interesting. It says Roman pottery, vases, gold coins, and a coin with Boadicea Jordinaris on it. So they found a coin which they thought was to do with Boadicea. Of course, this is early days of archaeology, you know, mid-19th century. They're trying to put things together and understand what they're finding. And sometimes they did get it a bit wrong. So again, there's the Wish Tower. I think that's Trinity Church, and here's the walls being pulled away, and there's some indication of red because there was brick on top of the stone. So I believe that the foundations were stone, and then the Romans had built in brick above that. Yeah, oh yes, it says at the bottom down here, with red brick, broken brick interspersed in the mortar. So there was brick in the mortar, and there'd also be, of course, the bits of brick brick-like substance which were from the flue tiles and the hypocaust tiles as well. Oh, and that one's clearly dated 1850. And of course all this was recorded, and then just a few years later it would be all destroyed, and the promenade and the seafront developed and the hotels built, and then it was lost. So in 2016, October 2016, when the carpet gardens had been cleared, the council gave permission for Joe and his team from Heritage Eastbourne, and also a team from Bournemouth University, led by Miles Russell, to dig in the carpet gardens. So they thought they'd definitely find something. Well, if you remember that map earlier, they were just off. It was just not in the right place. And so they did find a trench that had been filled with bits of Roman pottery, and then they also got down to the bedrock. So this is the bedrock here, and they found a Victorian lamppost halfway down, but very, very little, nothing that you could say was from the villa. But it did show the importance of the green sand, which is, the stone that was really valuable. So Pevensey Castle's built of it. There's green sand in the church. There's green sand in lots of buildings in Eastbourne, and it was exported inland to quite a few places as well. And the quarry would be on the beach, and when the tide's out, you can still see the reef going along there. And there was talk that there was a Roman harbour that was associated with the green sand, and that the boats, and if you look, you can sort of see a way in there, and that the harbour was where Eastbourne College is, the low-lying part there, from the Wish Tower, sort of going inland from there, and that's why it was called the Wish, or it was originally the Wash, because the water did go in there quite a way. But in fact, they've taken core samples in that grass around Eastbourne College and in that area, and the only snails are land snails. There's no sea snails. There's no evidence that that was actually a harbour in there. So I don't think the theory of the harbour is correct at all. But certainly the importance of the green sand was, which might be one reason that the villa was built there, and that the owner was involved with the export of this stone. So yeah, there's Pevensey Castle, which is built with green sand, but also the brick. So it's actually Pevensey Fort, because it's the Roman part, which is the curtain wall, which is that's the Roman part. The inside part, of course, is Norman and much later. But David Rudlin gave us a very good talk and walk around Pevensey Castle as well, explaining all about that. So what other evidence is there? So there's Beachy Head woman. Well, it's very disputable where she was actually found. The box of bones, a complete skeleton, was marked Beachy Head, and something like 1958 scrawled on it. But nobody is certain if she was found at Beachy Head, and there's another theory that she was actually found near East Dean. So it was decided to have her investigated, and Caroline Robinson, I think she was at Leeds University then, she's moved somewhere else now, she was on the television the other night with a reconstruction, I can't remember quite what, but so she took the skull and made up what she believed to be an accurate head from the evidence of the skull. And she maintained, she said that looking at the features, she was sub-Saharan African, which was a big shock, of course. She also dated her to Roman times, which was even more interesting in a way. Anyway, this was before, well, perhaps it was before the council could afford to spend quite a lot of money on DNA research, but they did. I think it was just before, about 3 years ago, they had these bones tested for DNA, and they found out she wasn't sub-Saharan African at all. She was from Cyprus. So the features were probably, you know, similar to that. Oh dear, sorry, wrong one. Similar to that, but she wasn't quite as dark as that. And so Beachy Head lady turns out to be a Roman. Her bones were in quite good condition, so she wasn't, if she was a slave, she wasn't doing heavy work. She was, you know, in a privileged position. But I don't think there were any goods, there were no artifacts with her, so just the skeleton. But it shows that the Romans were around. So, during the years, there's been quite a lot of research done up near Beachy Head at Bullock Down. And in the 1970s and early 1980s, Peter Druitt did several digs up there, and David Ruddling was actually a student with him, and so he worked on these digs too. And they surveyed the land, and they could work out that there were the Iron Age settlements, early Iron Age, and then that running into Romano-British settlement. So they also found the settlement of where the people lived, there were 6 sort of platforms. So they think there were, it was like a Roman peasant community. Probably from the Britons that were here before the Romans, they were probably left there from that, but nobody knows, of course. But what's most interesting was what they found up there, as well as the settlements and 2 corn drying kilns, so they were obviously farmers. They also found, over the years, from the beginning of the 19th century up until the 1980s, there's been 8 hoards of coins, which is a phenomenal amount, and thousands of coins altogether, ranging in date from very early Roman, well, I think just BC, but going up until the 4th century. And nobody knows for certain why there are all these hoards of coins up there. One hoard with over 1,000 coins was actually in a bucket, a little bucket-shaped thing called, I think it's called a hammer ford, something like that. And it's in the British Museum now, and it was a valuable thing in itself. It's made of copper, it's not made of silver or gold, but it was made in the Rhineland in Germany, and then crammed with these coins and buried. So in earlier times, the theory was that people were just safeguarding their money. They were putting it away in case of invasion or whatever, and then they could retrieve it at a later date. But now, generally, it is thought that they were votive offerings. And I think this was an important spiritual place up there on the top of the cliff, and that people would go to make their offerings, and there may have been several shrines up there, there may have been a temple up there, we don't know. Quite interesting finds. Well, the most important coin was this gold coin, which I've forgotten the date, but they can date that. But also this ring with Hercules, a naked Hercules, but with his hat on. And apparently he was the most popular of gods. And apparently a walker came across that when they were walking up on Bullock Down. So nice thing to find up there. I think that's in the British Museum as well. These more coins, and also this is the one of the corn drying. What was grain for drying the kilns for drying the corn out. So, what other villas are there around here? Well, there's Bignor, which is really a glorified farmhouse, except it has the most wonderful mosaics in it. So it's worth going to see the mosaics there. But again, it's same plan, same courtyard idea. There's a model on the left there and the map on the right. It's Fishbourne again, as I was saying. This is going to be Eastbourne one, maybe not quite as big, but on a similar sort of style to this. And Folkestone. Now Folkestone's very interesting because it is built on the cliff and it's eroding away in the same way that the Eastbourne one has. And it's still being excavated now, but you can see the layout of these parts here, and there probably was more going along here. So I think that with the Eastbourne one, that what they found in, or recognised in the early 18th century, was just the back corridor, that there was just as much on the front, and it probably stretched a long way. They're not sure who actually owned Fishbourne, but they think it was a man called, I'm going to have written this down, Tiberius Claudius Cogidubnus, or he's sometimes called Togidubnus. Okay, big mouthful of a name. And he was a local sort of protector of the area, and a local governor, and he had 3 sons. And some people believe that he built the 3 palaces for his sons. So one in Folkestone, one in Newhaven, and one in Eastbourne, which would fit in quite well because there's the road from Chichester, a Roman road, which has been traced to Folkestone. This road goes to Pevensey, and David Staveley, who does a lot of geophysics, looking for archaeological evidence that you can't see with your naked eye, but he's surveyed this road, and he's got a report out on it which runs from Chichester to Pevensey. And of course it runs quite near to Eastbourne, so it's going along the road into Polegate there. So Wootton Manor is one of the places where it runs through, and you can actually see bits of the road, where the road ran there, just as a dip, not any sort of paved surfaces. So the Roman road was linking these places together, these important palaces, and the road from, they think it cut off before Polegate, but went across the Downs and then up into Jevington, and then down into Eastbourne, Willingdon, up St Anne's Hill, and where the Saxon burial ground is, they found a Roman trackway through there. And they think that from there, of course, you can see, if you stand up there, you can see the Queen's Hotel, so you would have been able to have seen the villa in those days. And they're not quite sure which route it took, but it went from there down into the town to the villa. And Alan Smith, who's a member of the Local History Society, in a recent magazine, has done some research on Elms Avenue. Now, if you think about seaside, the roads along that area, they all are on a grid system. But Elms Avenue is completely at an angle and different to that. And he maintains that this is the continuation of the Roman trackway or road, and that was the entrance to the villa, which is quite feasible. These two blocks of marble, pillars of marble, were found in the ground just along from there in Lansdowne Terrace, so not so far away. And they could have come from the villa, or they could have come from a temple. I mean, that's another idea, that there could have been a temple there. But this road points to it all tying up with the villa. And so Fishbourne is really important to understand what Eastbourne Roman villa was like. And as I say, they're finding out more about things, so that they're still digging at Folkestone, so they may find more, whereas we haven't got a hope of finding anything in Eastbourne because it's all been built over, and it would just be luck if somebody in a garden in Elms Avenue did discover something, but I think it's very, very unlikely, really. But yeah, so this is the mosaic that was found in London, which a very large mosaic in Southwark in London about 2 years ago. And I think this is a sort of similar pattern to the designs that were found in Eastbourne. Oh, but I don't think I mentioned that they did find bits of Tesserae from the mosaics, but these were all sold as souvenirs. So there's a big trade in that. The holiday makers would buy these to take away, as they took gemstones and semi-precious stones and shells and fossils and things like that. So the Tesserae would be all part of that as well. And they
given hammers.
They were given hammers to go and remove pieces to take away. Yeah. So
what sort of time would that be that was happening?
in Victorian times and before that, yeah, in the 1800s, you know, when he was making his drawings that I showed you, from then on until it was developed in the mid 19th century. Yeah, that was when they were doing that. They also found bits of pottery. Maybe some of them were flue tiles and hypocourse tiles and pottery. They also found bits of Samian ware, which is the higher class, the top end of the tableware. But you know, it's that red, rather shiny pottery, and it was made in Gaul, in France, and imported. So that again was a sign of status. But none of that has survived, unfortunately. There is a lump of Tesserae mosaic in the local history museum, but it is just a lump. I don't know whether it's on show at the Beachy Head story, but might be. But it's of no, it's not really very enticing. And then just last year, they uncovered this big villa in Rutland in the Midlands, and no, it's not a very good picture. And this mosaic dates a bit later than the Eastbourne ones, I think, but it was quite a find. And again, it was covered on Alice Roberts' Digging for Britain programme. She had a piece about that the other week. And the last really intriguing thing is that the Montreal Museum has this labelled as coming from Eastbourne. So it's a statue of Hercules again, and it's on their website, and I asked them if we could have permission to use it. I think there's mention of one or two other things, but I couldn't actually find them on their website. But this one is clearly marked as coming from Eastbourne, so this probably came from the villa as well. Of course, there might have been another villa down where the hospital is, the DGH, because when they were digging the King's Drive excavation, which was about 5-6 years ago, they found bits of flue tile there. They found Roman burials, some cremations, but also some skeletons as well in a sort of shrine on that site. And there's also a trackway from there, sort of running parallel to King's Drive, going towards the seafront. So again, that would be leading to the villa. So more evidence that the Romans were there. But whether we'll find out anything more in the future, I don't know. The flue tiles are particularly interesting. David Ruddling has promised that he's going to send me this information. I've been waiting for nearly a year now for it. And he thinks that he knows where the flue tiles were actually manufactured, because they've got a sort of wavy line that's made by a comb on them, and that is particular to one place somewhere in Surrey. So then they weren't made locally, they were actually brought some distance, which is interesting, because there was clay down in the seaside area. There were brickworks down there in later times, so there is clay locally, but these were actually imported. So you're always finding out something, and things are adding to it.